Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at. This is Dr. Sanchez, and I am going to review situational leadership approach to leadership. We're going to review the approach, perspective, the different leadership styles, the developmental levels, and how does the situational approach work. First of all, leaders match their style to the competence and commitment of subordinates. This situational approach was developed by Hersey and Blanchard in 1969. And it is one of the most recognized approaches to leadership because the premise of the theory is that different situations demand different kinds of leadership. From that perspective, it requires a leader to adapt his or her style to the different situations. It also allows the leader to assess and evaluate their employees on how competent and how committed they are to perform a given task. And like I said, it's been used extensively in organizational leadership and training. The definition is comprised of both directive dimension and supportive dimension. So on page 100 of your book, you'll see the situational leadership matrix. And on the left axis is the supportive dimension. And on the bottom axis is the directive dimension. Each dimension must be applied appropriately in a given situation. And again, like I said, the leaders are constantly evaluating their employees to assess their competence and commitment of a given task. The definition of this leadership style is the behavior pattern of an individual who attempts to influence others, and this includes directive behaviors, which are tasks, and supportive behaviors, which is relationship driven. So the first dimension is directive behaviors. It helps the group members in goal achievement, but it's one-way communication through giving directions, establishing goals, methods of evaluation, timelines, defining roles. So it's a leader who is directing the behaviors of their followers by just one-way communication to them. The next dimension is supportive behaviors. Assists a group member in two-way communication, in feeling comfortable with themselves, their coworkers, and their situation. So this leader is going to be asking the followers for input, helping with problem solving, providing praise, and listening. As you can see from the matrix, there are 4 types of leadership styles in the situational leadership model. And it's broken out into 4 different kinds: S1, S2, S3, S4. I'm going to review each of those styles. The first one being directing style. The directing style focuses the leader on communication on goal achievement. The first style is considered a high directive, low supportive style. Using this style, a leader gives instructions about what and how goals are to be achieved by the subordinates, and then supervises them carefully. So they're spending less time using the supportive behaviors, as I talked about, and they're more directive. S2 is called the coaching style. It is high directive and also highly supportive. The leader focuses on communication on both achieving goals and meeting subordinates' emotional needs. It also requires the leader to have involvement through encouragement and solicitation of their input. So the coaching style requires that the leader involves himself and herself in the support with subordinates by giving encouragement and soliciting input. However, the coaching style in itself requires that the leader makes the final decision on the what and the how of a goal accomplishment. S3 is the supporting style, high supportive, low directive. In this style, the leader does not focus exclusively on goals, but uses supportive behaviors that bring out the employee's skills around a task to be accomplished. The supportive style includes listening, praising, asking for input, and giving feedback. A leader using this style gives subordinates control of their day-to-day decisions, but remains available to facilitate problem solving. In this supportive style, the leader is quick to give recognition and social support to the subordinates. And the last style is delegating style. The leader, this is a low supportive, low directive. The leader offers less task input or social support, facilitates subordinates' confidence and motivation in relation to the task. The leader lessens involvement in planning, control, and details, gives subordinates control, and refrains from intervention and unneeded social support. So after the group agrees on what it is to do, this style lets the subordinates take the responsibility for getting the job done the way they see fit. A leader using the S4, the delegating style, gives control to the subordinates and refrains from intervening with any unnecessary social support. The second part of the leadership model is determining the developmental levels of the followers. So it's the second part of situational leadership that concerns the development level of the subordinates. Development level is the degree to which the subordinates have the competence and the commitment necessary to accomplish a given task or activity. So an employee at the high development level, if they are interested and confident in their work, know how to do the task. Employees at the low development level, if they have little skill for the task at hand but believe they have the motivation or confidence to get the job done. So again, the definition is the degree to which the subordinates have the competence and the commitment necessary. And on the bottom of this slide you can see high, moderate, and low. And the high is high competence. The followers know what they're doing and they're highly committed, to the low, which is a low competence. They don't have the skill, but they have a high degree of commitment that they can really get the task accomplished. So how does the situational approach work? First of all, it focuses and assumes that subordinates are along a developmental continuum of competence and commitment. So the situational approach is construed around the idea that employees move forward and backward along the developmental continuum, which represents the relative competence and commitment of the subordinates. For leaders to be effective, it's essential that they determine where the subordinates are on that leadership continuum and adapt their leadership style so that they can directly match their style to the developmental needs of their followers. So that means that the leaders have to constantly assess and adapt their style. This model, the situational leadership model approach, requires leaders to really demonstrate a strong degree of flexibility. The first task, obviously, is to diagnose the situation. They have to identify. Leaders have to do two things in this. Diagnose the situation, identify the developmental level of an employee. They'll ask questions like, what is the task subordinates are being asked to perform? How complicated is it? What is their skill set? And do they desire to complete the job? The second task is to adapt their style. Based on the model, the leadership style must correspond to the employee's development level. How does the situational model work? And I shared this with you in the previous. This is really a matrix and a suggestion of how it should work. So if you have an employee with low competence, which is low skill, but a high commitment, they really want to do the job, they're committed, they're motivated, but they're probably new in their position, then what this theory says on the situational approach is the best leadership style to use is directing. On the other continuum, if they have high competence, they're very good at what they do, plus they have high commitment and motivation to complete the task, then the situational leadership approach is more of the S4 delegating. The strengths of this is the situational approach has really practicality in the business world. It provides a model to train employees or managers on how to effectively be leaders by situations they have in their work. So it's wonderfully practical. It's also extremely accepted in the marketplace. Like I said, many organizations have a lot of training around the situational leadership model because it's well known and it's frequently used. And the third is it's prescriptive. So situational leadership clearly outlines what you should and should not do in various settings, like the previous slide. It kind of gives you the guidelines that you need when a situation happens. Situational leadership stresses that leaders need to find out about their subordinates' needs and then adapt their leadership style accordingly. Leaders cannot lead using a single style. They must be willing to change their style to meet the requirements of the situation. So that's the differential treatment that I just talked about. They have to know the situation and then treat each subordinate according to their needs. And the situational leadership stresses flexibility, that they change their style. Let's talk about the criticisms. First, there's lack of empirical foundation that raises theoretical considerations regarding the validity of this approach. There's really been only a few research studies that have really been conducted to justify the assumptions around the situational leadership model. So further research is required to determine how commitment and competence of the followers are conceptualized for each developmental level. The other thing is the authors of situational leadership did not really explain the theoretical basis for these changes in the composition of each of those developmental levels. So it's kind of unclear. And then replication studies, and many PhD students on their dissertations use the situational approach as part of their dissertation studies, but replication studies fail to support the basic prescriptions of the situational model. It does not account for, this model does not account for how particular demographics influence the leader-subordinate prescription. So you can see that, you know, whether it's gender or any kind of diversity may influence the leader's perspective. It fails to adequately address the issues of one-on-one versus group leadership. So this is really focused on the group kind of leadership. And if you see the questionnaire in the back, it's biased on or in favor of situational leadership. And so it really does have a bent. It's specific parameters around situational leadership rather than in terms of other leadership behaviors. The application, it's often used in consulting because it's easy to conceptualize and apply. It's pretty straightforward in nature. It makes it practical for the managers to apply it. I mean, it especially when it gives you that matrix and the context by which you should lead, kind of gives you that prescription of what to do. And the breadth of the situational approach facilitates its applicability in virtually all types of organizations and levels. Like I said, situational leadership is taught in a lot of organizations. And so it allows the leaders to learn how to assess their employees, both on the competence and commitment, but it also allows them to flex their leadership style with the situation. It's a very interesting concept. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put it on the discussion board, and I will try to answer as best I can. Thank you for attending.